Real estate Mavericks take a lot of pleasure here in welcoming Bleejay Innis, Managing Director of Tribucannon Development Corporation and Managing Partner of Ikemba Investment Group. Welcome. Welcome to the show today.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate you having me.
All right. Very good then. So you've got a unique journey here. You were leaving Liberia during the Civil War
Yes,
and yes, and coming back and building major developments. That is a powerful story, Bleejay. Um, hey, the global angle on this, I always find that cross-border development is particularly fascinating, especially when you're connecting global capital with local markets in West Africa.
absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's been a exciting journey, still is an exciting journey. Lots of lessons
Hmm.
learned along the way and lots of lessons still being learned. But, like you said, I left Liberia when I was about 7 years old during the civil crisis in the country and was
Hmm.
blessed to have an opportunity to be educated and raised mostly in the U.S. and grew up in the Boston area for the most part. I knew that I've always been an entrepreneur at heart, and I knew
Hmm.
that I wanted to do something entrepreneur. Didn't know what it was going to be, obviously as a kid going into college, but I knew I wanted to start a business and have an impact. So I decided to study international business in undergrad and
Hmm.
then I went on to get my master's in real estate development at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. And,
Nice.
while working in D.C. is where I kind of fell in love with real estate development, started learning more about the development space and development scene, and started traveling back home to Africa frequently and saw there was a major and growing demand and need for quality
Hmm.
real estate and people who really understand the industry and decided to marry the two, my love for a home and my love for real estate to try to build a company to do that.
Wonderful. This is an amazing story here. So, Luigi, how did you how was your experience here in the U.S. shaping the way that you approach development today uh, in Africa?
Yeah, absolutely. I think information, one of the things I realized and learned working in the US is that data and information is key.
Hmm.
Investors and people make their decisions based on the data and analysis and say, okay, yes, it may be a feel-good story, but what does the data say? What does the information say?
Hmm.
And I think for a long period of time, I mean, that's how when you try to get money from the banks or try to get money from the investors, they want to know where is it located? Where's the development located? What are you developing? Is the target market there to support what you're building? And if they do all of their risk analysis and feel that, yes, this deal is going to be successful, they give you the money. Doing business in Liberia is a little different because one, when people Google Liberia, first of all they may come up with initially is the Civil War story, and so much more is happening.
Yeah.
Liberia's been years past Civil War, and so much
Hmm.
development and investment and innovation is happening. So, how do you bypass the internet to say, hey, no, what's actually happening on the ground is very different than what you may see online or what
Right.
you may have heard, about Liberia. So you're fighting that battle about the
Yeah.
reputation. You're fighting the reputation, and then there
Hmm.
was no data available. You couldn't go online and say,
Hmm.
okay, what is the average cost per square foot to build in Monrovia or in the capital city of Liberia, or
Hmm.
to find comps. What are comparable deals to what you're trying to do? Those numbers really don't exist. So for me, I had to come in there. I utilized a lot of my knowledge on how do you gather information, gather data that I
Hmm.
had from working experience here in the US and went to Liberia and started talking to landlords, started talking to contractors, started talking to people, building relationships to start getting a
Hmm.
sense of deals that they were doing, starting to put some of the numbers together myself. And and that's how I started getting my foot wet. That's how I utilized experience, also the experience of partnerships and joint ventures was a major thing
Hmm.
for me. That's something that I learned working here in the US, how a lot of developers, they do joint venture with landowners, they do joint
Yeah.
venture with other developers in order to be able to structure a deal and make it work. So I started educating people locally on joint ventures. That's how we secured some development sites. We didn't have the capital to go and buy a bunch of land,
Yeah.
but had the knowledge and experience to say, hey, we can structure a deal this way. Instead of you leasing your land to me or me buying it, I can leverage your land as equity in the deal, and then I can go out and try to raise capital and then execute the development.
Some great creative approaches there. What was the exact moment like when you decided to return and commit to building in over there? I mean, what was it like? What was that moment like?
Yeah, it was very surreal. For me, it was something that I prayed about. Always felt like God had a calling for me to go back. I was blessed to leave Liberia with my life and my family's life during
Yeah.
that difficult period. And I
Yeah.
felt that, I had a responsibility at some point to go back to be part of rebuilding, whether it
Yes.
was socially or infrastructural, from an infrastructure perspective, physically. But I knew there was a strong pull every time I visited. There was a calling to go back and to impact people. I saw a lot of young people. The average age in Liberia is about 19 years old. So
Wow.
there are a lot of young people who don't have skills, who don't have jobs. And for a nation that is a developing nation and rebuilding, we know that the construction, real estate, development industry provides a lot of jobs. And I
Right.
think part of the exciting part of that for me was, being able to go back into see that I wasn't just doing a deal, but I was impacting people's lives. I brought on interns for some of our construction projects. So we had interns who came from the university who didn't have any practical experience. It was all theory in school. There are many
Mm.
internships, so brought some interns on to work with us on projects, so they got to learn, engineering, project management, and different thing hands-on in projects. And we ended up hiring some of those interns full time. So, at least two of the interns that worked with us initially went from not
Mm.
having much experience till now they are, supervisors or site engineers for us as well now. So those were
Right.
some of the things that really, that was surreal for me, that, hey, you're not just doing projects to try to get a deal done. You're actually nation building. And I think that's what I've been passionate
Yes.
about is nation building physically,
Yeah.
morally, and, in every aspect, of the word.
Mm. I mean, you're operating in a market that I would say most investors don't fully understand or even partially understand. What makes Liberia and West Africa compelling for development?
Man, I mean, Africa is
Yeah.
probably is not even probably is the fastest growing continent. Right now, Africa is the youngest continent. So
Yeah.
it's emerging markets all across the continent. Obviously there's a
Yes.
perception sometimes that Africa is a country rather than a continent. Africa consists, of 54 different countries. So very
Mm.
diverse depending on north, south, east, and west and where you're doing business. But the economies in across Africa are rapidly growing, and you
Hmm.
have a very, very young population, that
Mm.
that they are consumers. They're consuming technology. They need places to live. Africa has a major housing gap that is trying to fill. So development is necessary. How are you all of this fast growing and young population, as they're getting educated, where are they going to live? Where's the
Mm.
infrastructure being built? Who's building it? Who's building it at a quality standard?
Mm.
For them, from residential to commercial. There are people from the diaspora and people internationally who want to go, and they're setting up investments and businesses. Where are the commercial developments and where's that infrastructure, for them to
Yeah.
come in and lease a property and lease an office space or lease a commercial space? So,
Right.
those two things. And, there's statistics that are saying, Africa is the largest market for agriculture. So,
Mm.
Africa's going to feed the world, so everyone is looking. Africa has the natural resources, the gold, iron
Hmm.
ore, diamonds, and all of these things, and people are running there, to tap into it. But like you said,
Yeah.
there is a lack of knowledge of the different countries and education on what's
Sure.
actually happening on the continent. So as
Yeah.
as time goes on, it's just naturally definitely going to be an increased demand of people wanting to do
Sure.
business in Africa and looking for people who are within their networks and are positioned and doing business on the continent that can help
To
introduce them to
participate
the
in that.
market.
Yes, yes. So, BJ, where are the biggest opportunities right now in Liberia?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I am biased, so I would say I am in real estate, but I think real estate and infrastructure is a massive opportunity.
It's
Uh,
essential. Yeah.
yeah, it's very, very essential. So, construction and housing, you cannot go wrong. Whether you're doing affordable housing or market rate housing, obviously looking to see where all of that aligns, looking to see where all of that aligns, and there's an opportunity there. People
Yeah.
talk about agriculture is one of the biggest opportunities in Africa. There's tons of opportunity to be able to grow and grow food and be able to sell domestically and internationally as well. And then you say, okay, where does real estate fit into that picture? It's so real estate is so much bigger than commercial and residential. It's industrial, it's warehousing, it's cold storage, it's all of these
Sure.
things. So if there's an agricultural boom, Africa has a logistics problem. So a lot of crops get ruined because there is improper storage and logistics. So where do you store the crops? How do you move it? So
So,
warehousing and industrial real estate is a major
which is more,
opportunity,
yeah, more commercial real
as
estate.
as well
Hmm.
for the continent.
What risks would investors who are not familiar with Liberia misunderstand or overestimate? The
Yeah, I
simplest.
think I think one of the greatest things people feel that in a lot of African countries you have a lot of people because of a lack of jobs that are living below the on paper that are living below the poverty line, right?
Mm,
So you're saying, okay, there's a group of people, a large group of people, you may not visually be able to say, okay, here's a large middle or upper income, depending on the country, right? But
mm,
just like any other country, you have middle class, you have a higher class, you have lower income people, and you're saying, okay, what am I building? What am I developing? How does it tailor to these different groups, and how do I capture that? A lot of African countries are cash-based economies. I know, like Liberia, where I work, it's a heavy, heavy cash-based economy,
yeah.
and people also worry about inflation. What does local currency look like? What does that mean for me being able to repatriate my funds to the US or wherever if I'm taking money out? How does that affect my deal structuring if I'm investing and
Hmm.
the currencies are not performing well? Well, there are a lot of African currencies that are performing well against the dollar. Liberia, for example, most real estate, most big business is done in US currency in Liberia. So in real estate, for example, rents are paid 6 months to a year in advance, so not month to month. So
Wow.
rents are not paid month to month. So imagine you have a real estate investment property, let's say something as simple as an apartment. People are paying you 6 months to a year in US currency.
I
And
think the landlords like that.
no, absolutely. They love that. So, for that, not much of a turnover. Even in commercial, that's how people pay as well, too. So
Okay.
just the structure of commitment to people renting, whether it's residential or commercial, is different.
Hmm.
Again, it's a cash-based economy. So, and it's just rapidly growing. And then you have dense populations where you always have a target audience and you have clientele that you can cater
Hmm.
the market to. So people fear that is, hey, if I put my money in here, I may not be able to get it out from an investment standpoint. And I think it's just smart investing. It's, what are you investing in? Where are you investing? And knowing the
Hmm.
right people is a very, very important thing. People who
Right.
have knowledge of the market who can help steer you in the right direction to make sure that you're making a
Hmm.
successful investment.
So at Tribucannon Development Corporation, you've led major projects like Atlantic View Residences. Now, if you could describe that a little bit, and then what goes into executing something at that scale?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm no longer with Tribucannon, but I
Yeah.
served there as managing director and leading business development operations there when I worked there, and
Yeah.
it was focused on primarily project management and engineering. But it was an amazing experience where we were partnered with a U.S. based construction company. So to be able to take some of the knowledge that we had from the U.S. based construction company and combine that with the projects and expertise that we were executing in Liberia was
Hmm.
an amazing opportunity. And you realize that it's not, there are a lot of things that are different, but a lot of things that are not so different. Everything is relationship based.
Yeah.
Just like in the US, deals are based off of relationships. Opportunities and doors that are open are all based off of relationships. So, a lot of that was me priding myself on establishing the right relationships. I would say our first year into business was me building relationships with people in the private sector, in the government, building relationships to build our team, to bring in the right project managers, to bring in the right engineers, to bring in the right architects, and really I built,
Hmm.
build our team from the ground up. So that was an amazing
Nice.
experience for me to be able to find a lot of those people and see some of the projects that we executed. We did everything from single family residences to public institution buildings,
Mm.
build projects for government, project for NGOs. So it was an amazing experience to be able to see within such a short period of time what we were able to get involved in, and the relationships that we were able to build, and those relationships are still firm and still strong to this day.
Yes. So you have quite a breadth of experience here. How do you manage site acquisition, approvals, and constructions in the Liberian environment? And what separates successful projects from ones that have too many challenges, let's say? I mean, you've
Yeah.
been in the trenches there, so
Yeah, I would
yeah.
I would say due diligence is very important, especially in this part of the world. When it comes to site acquisitions, land ownership and land rights is still a challenge. In many rights, it's a thing that they're trying to fix, and that's why I come back to joint ventures were a primary focus. For me on the
Hmm.
development side, where do you find people? Because land is readily available. So if you're trying to acquire a site, do your due diligence. And even sometimes when you do your due diligence, there is a opportunity of risk as well. But
Hmm.
based on the relationships that I had, we were talking to lawyers, we were talking to the courts, we were talking to neighbors, and making sure there was full validation. And then when you're
Hmm.
doing, obviously with joint ventures, again, you still have to validate the site, that who you're partnering with actually owns the sites before you put in capital. So a lot of that was for me was making sure who was I partnering with, who were we purchasing property from, to make sure we were doing our proper and legal due diligence,
Hmm.
and that helped us out a lot. Again, having relationships with people who understand the market, even though I'm from Liberia. I didn't grow up in Liberia. I left when I was very young. So
Yeah.
knowing that there's a lot that I couldn't bring my American hat and American mindset to Liberia and say, hey, because I have experience in this, I'm going to totally ignore a local context. So understanding the local context is very important. So I made
Yeah.
sure that the people who were hired to do certain things, I put them in the front. Right. So I made
Yeah.
sure that, hey, if it's your
Hmm.
job to go out and build relationships and acquire sites, or to go to the public works office and make sure that permits and all of these things are in place, my face is not going to be in front of that. You have
Yeah.
those relationships, you understand how those offices and how those institutions work, and will put you in position for that. So I was very good at
Picking the right people. Yeah.
delegating, understanding local
Yeah.
context,
Hmm.
delegating, doing due diligence, and basically operating from a place of where I knew my expertise was and what my focus was, and being able to empower people to do what they do best.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. So, DJ, you're known for bridging diaspora capital and local opportunities, bridging those and bringing them together. How does that process work?
Yeah, so I'm happy to say I am a Liberian American, or American Liberian, and
Hmm.
the relationships that I built through work and through education here in the U.S. and just through networking has been powerful. I think people see that I'm living it, I'm doing it, and I'm there, and that builds a sense of trust. But just for me, being a conduit of giving actual information, and educating people on what's actually happening on ground has been a powerful tool. So I do a lot of, I try to attend conferences, I try to attend real estate events. Sometimes I host investment events, or I host information sessions where I'm just educating people on the market. What are the
Mm-hmm.
opportunities? We also organize tours as well, organize business tours for business people who just want to get there. And I'm a big proponent of, hey, don't just believe what I'm saying. Just step on the ground and see it for yourself. So I believe that before anybody even invests, you should come and see what's happening in the market for yourself. So I'm organizing tours. I'm bringing people to Liberia. I'm introducing them to
Mm.
different government offices, different institutions that would be responsible for the investments that they're trying to make. So that has been a major tool of me interfacing with people through different events and different platforms, and then
Mm.
bringing them physically to the country that I'm working
Sure.
in, to come in and see the relationships that I have, to tap into those networks and
Yep.
those relationships, and then physically see what's happening in the country themselves, and in order to make an informed decision.
Yep. So, with Ikemba Investment Group, you're scaling investments across Ghana and Liberia, both. What's your strategy for identifying high yield opportunities?
Yeah, so it's you're seeing, we first of all, it's us just doing our due diligence and on the
Yeah.
market, and where is demand. We do a lot of
Mm.
research. We look at like the mandate of the government. Where is funding for the government? What are things that they're pushing towards? If we're seeing a lot of cranes going up, and we're seeing buildings, and we're seeing new developments happening, we try to follow what's the trend. So we know that, hey, if a government is building a new public institution building here, there has to be housing nearby to support that. If there are consulates or new embassies that are opening, they need office space. They need
Mm.
residences in order to be able to stay in. So we do a good job of following the news and following what's actually happening policy wise, and what's
Yeah.
happening in the news and what demand is telling us. And then we're looking at the growth. We're also seeing that, as infrastructure, roads are starting to open in certain places. For instance, Liberia has one of the longest coastlines in sub-Saharan Africa. So beautiful
Well,
beaches, miles of beaches, and the country is not very large. I would say maybe the size of like Tennessee, of
sure.
a state. But as the country opens up, infrastructure wise, naturally people are running to try to purchase land or try to make investments in certain places. So we are also following the road development trend. Where are roads
Yeah.
opening up to? What are those roads opening up to? And how do we do our due diligence to know that, hey, if we buy land here, or we try to do a joint
Right.
venture on a site here, we know what the highest and best use of that site is, based on
Nice.
what businesses are around, or based on what the target market is around there. So, we have a great team that does a lot of research, and tries to follow up on what's happening, government wise, development wise, in the private sector, what companies are coming
Sure.
into the market. But
Hmm.
overall, we know that, even in Ghana, we know that, for instance, there are a lot of people from the American diaspora and other places who are moving and running to Ghana, people who are looking to do business there, and looking to do business in places like Liberia, and looking for a home. So we try to do our best. And we know that, one, housing is number one. These people want to do business, and they want to come and live there, whether it's
Is
for
that
investment
the
purpose.
biggest sector right now? Is it basic housing or higher
Absolutely.
end housing? Is that the biggest
Absolutely, absolutely.
most
I
okay.
would say, anything from, affordable housing is a major need, but there's a lot of market rate housing. Ghana has a very, very fast rising GDP as well, and a strong and growing middle class, and upper
Mm.
class as well as a much larger market. So the housing market is there's a boom in housing and apartments in Ghana right
Okay.
now. And then you have a lot of tourists going for vacation. So short-term rentals and things like that are growing. In Liberia, long-term housing is a need. There are a lot of people from the diaspora who are looking for long-term housing. People are looking for gated communities. People want apartments or even condos. The
Yeah.
condo market is something that is working successfully in East Africa,
Oh,
like Kenya and other places. You'll see the Chinese are primarily building large apartment buildings and just selling apartment units, basically like condos. That's
hmm.
a model where a lot of people can, invest and say, okay, I can buy $80,000 condo, or I can buy $150,000 condo, and know that I'm still within a range and I can do successfully in renting it without maintaining an entire property, right? So all of those are fast rising needs, and people have different price points. So it's finding out, hey, how do I navigate the different price points that clients have, and to help better situate my investment.
How do you say the difference would be between evaluating deals in Liberia or Ghana and the U.S.? What approaches, what do you focus on that's different in a nutshell here?
Yeah, I mean, I would say in the US, you're really looking at what you're looking at the data. I would say you're heavily driven on data,
Hmm.
and you make your decision off of that, and then you're also looking at what are your financial models, and what does financing look like from a banking capital perspective. What are institutions that can fund my deal, and all of these things are concerns of yours. And I would say to a level in Africa, um, and in Ghana and in Liberia, it's you visually kind of see the demand, you see the growth happening, and you see the industrialization like
Yeah,
physically happening in front of you. Like in the US, you can go and say, hey, I'm going to run these comms. I'm going to run all of these numbers, and I'm going to see what the deal looks like and if it's going to be successful. But it's like in Africa when you're there, it's like it's very very in your face and it's visual, and
yeah. The
you get
expansion, the
the
growth, the
expansion, everything.
construction.
It's
Yeah,
happening all around you, and it's happening so fast, and you're like, man,
yep.
I have to be a part of this. I have to get involved in what's happening. So I can imagine maybe, when the US was industrializing, and, certain countries started to have a huge expansion and growth, and,
Hmm.
baby boomers came back from the war, and housing was a need, and all of these things. It's like you felt it, you knew that there was a growth happening, and this investment needed to happen. And I think a lot
Yeah,
of that sometimes it's not even, you can put a great proposal together and you can try to shop it to an investor who necessarily is like, okay, yeah, this all sounds good, but sitting miles away across the ocean, um, is this is
yeah,
can you really get these returns in Africa, right?
yeah.
And they're
So,
so focused on the numbers and the proposal, they miss an opportunity because unless you get there on ground and you know what's actually happening,
and see
your
it. Hmm.
perception, your perception completely changes of
So, Bleejay, you're not just building projects, you're building, I guess, entire ecosystems or large scale community improvements. How do you balance profit with social impact?
I think it's really natural in this setting. One, for me being from there, I think I have a natural passion to see social development happening. And I know that the lives that I'm impacting it's even greater than the profits that I can make. I know the deals, there's
Yep.
opportunity, and I think there's an opportunity to do both. And I think even in the U.S., right, that's I think sometimes, depending on who you are as a person, what your values are, people focus on greed and want to maximize profit at the detriment of other people. And I see that in Liberia as well. You see builders who are trying to maximize profit at the detriment of social development.
Mm,
And I think that's a personal trait more than anything. I think whatever market you're in, you're always going to have people who are focused, who are profit driven. But I think what lasts and what protects your investment is social investment and social development. And I think
mm,
you're saying, okay, what's going to ensure the safety and the protection of my investment is
yeah.
impacting lives. The people will protect what you're building, protect what you're investing. They will protect
With
you as an
those
individual
connections that you
with those
establish,
connections.
which
Absolutely.
that my next point here is you have a reputation, a huge reputation as a strong connector of people to institutions, investors. How important is networking to your business?
Oh, networking is everything. Networking
Everything, yeah.
is is number one. I mean, networking is where everyone who works with me, every employee, even business partners, has all come through networking. Recommendations for projects, referrals to other clients, has all come from networking. There's never a time that I sit on a plane and I fly and I don't get to know the person who sits next to me. I don't get to hear their story. I
Nice.
don't get to share their story, and I've built tons of relationships. No matter where I'm flying, I end up talking the whole flight with somebody and building a real relationship, with that person. So I think it's so important. At the time, I used to believe that, hey, you have to be at a certain place in your career and super successful in order to really have value in networking and building a relationship. And I realize it's just telling your story is powerful. Telling your
Hmm.
story is important. It opens up a lot of doors. And being a genuine person, when you build that network, how do you maintain it, as well?
Yeah.
So outside of business, sometimes it's being genuine, and just I remember I've gotten business from people who initially I saw there was no opportunity for business, but just build a genuine relationship. But just every year, Merry Christmas, Happy Thanksgiving,
Yeah.
remembering to do these little things. And then 3, 4, 5 years down the line, hey, I want to introduce you to somebody. I came across
Hmm.
somebody, oh, hey, I'm looking to invest in this or doing this project, and I thought about you. So, sometimes some of it is immediate, and some of it pays dividends later on in life. But,
Later on. Yeah.
to answer your question,
Um,
networking is everything.
what are your core principles in how you build trust from an international perspective with the local stakeholders there in Liberia and Ghana? How do you bring them together? I mean, physically, yes, but how does that work?
Yeah, I think I think immersing yourself um in the communities, getting to know people, immersing yourself in the culture, and knowing and understanding what's needed. I think a lot of international companies fail because they have a perception of what they think a market needs, or what they think a community or people need. And I think it's
Yeah,
important as well to go on ground and understand what do people want, what do people want to see, what do people need, what type of impact are people looking for. So sometimes when we're investing, for example, when we're doing a development in a community, we walk the community and talk to the people. Hey, are there
yeah,
any skill sets here that you people have? Are there skills people or unskilled people? What are you looking for in this community? We're about to do this development. How do you see it impacting you? What are things that are
yeah.
needs or in the community? So I think just immersing yourself in a culture, in the community is important, where you build trust, and people want to
And
see the truth.
you do bring investors to Liberia and Ghana
Yes, yes,
and take them around and get them to know the local communities and the
absolutely.
local stakeholders. Yeah,
Absolutely,
yeah,
which is
cool.
very
Yeah, yeah.
important.
So you've been very successful in your career. You are a role model for younger people wanting to get into this space. What advice would you give someone who's trying to build, a network like you're doing here? An international network. What kind of advice would you give a person?
And say, get uncomfortable. The opportunities are in new experiences or in new relationships. So, um, get get uncomfortable, do something that you've never done before, connect with people you've never connected with before, um, put yourself in places where you're going to meet the right people, put yourself in places where you're going to get the information, that you need, and take a chance, on yourself, take a chance on new relationships and new opportunities. I know a lot of relationships and opportunities, again, that have opened up for me, has been on me just being bold and saying, hey, you know what, I'm going to attend this conference, just so that I can network with people and meet people. Hey, I'm going to book a flight and see who I know in this particular country, and
Hmm.
go there and spend a few days there and see it for myself, and build that relationship, for myself.